So, I mean, the slides themselves, we will share them, but actually the important bit about the slides is sort of the references at the end. The actual slides themselves are just kind of prompts for us, and I think there's a few bits of detail here for Jonathan. Forgive me, I'm going to read a lot from these notes because that's how I prefer to present. So if I'm looking down a lot, then apologies. But essentially, I think we submitted this abstract in the hope that we could start a bit of a conversation about our approach to micro-credentials and some of the larger questions around, what do they mean for higher education? How can we make them inclusive and, relevant to our global audience? And so I've made quite a few notes, but I'm going to try and blitz through them. I think I did a Control F for question marks, and there's about 40. So I'm asking a lot of questions, and I'm expecting some answers from the audience. So if there's any questions I ask that you think I could probably give some insight into that, then keep it in your head, and we'll try and make some time for it at the end. So yeah, the title of our session is How Can Micro-Credentials Support Inclusive and Global Education? This was originally going to be a lightning exercise, but RIDE were kind enough to extend this. So we are going to try and fill this as much relevant material as possible. I'm going to provide some context, and then Jonathan's going to talk about a pilot, and then I'll finish with some research-informed thoughts about micro-credentials, and then we'll open up for discussion. So at first glance, I'm hoping you all know what micro-credentials. Of course, everyone knows exactly what micro-credential is. That's a joke, but they seem to offer quite a compelling solution to many challenges facing higher education, so flexibility, accessibility, alignment with workforce needs. But we are kind of committed to the broader values of higher education at the University of London, so there are tensions that they bring as well. And I think for us, we've been sort of exploring this space. We want to really understand the global momentum behind micro-credentials, share what we've learned about our own pilot program, and examine whether micro-credentials can serve the purpose beyond just employment outcomes, which obviously are very important. So yes, please ask questions from us and think about questions we're going to ask you. So the context is that micro-credentials have a potential to really influence the approach that we have to distance flexible learning. Again, like I said, flexibility to learners. They could offer an option for rapidly responding to growing policy and industry interest, particularly in countries where upskilling and workforce alignments are really key priorities. They also allow universities to expand their reach beyond full degrees, creating new ways to engage with learners over time. But it does ask, like I said, raise a lot of questions. So are micro-credentials a way to widen participation, or do they reinforce existing inequalities in access to education? Who's driving their adoption? Learners, universities, employers? Why is that important? Are we at risk of fragmenting the value of higher education? Our role in this conversation really is trying to just contribute to the discussion, not by offering answers per se, but certainly trying to kind of critically engage with the purpose and the structure and the long-term implications. And again, we really want your insights. So why micro-credentials? The case of micro-credentials is often framed around 6 key areas. That's flexible work, learning pathways, enhanced employability, scalability and accessibility, increased policy attention, post-pandemic demand for lifelong learning, and kind of more of an adoption of digital education, and obviously from university leaders' point of view, financial and market opportunities as well. Some of these sound quite compelling, but again, are we at risk of eroding kind of traditional values of higher education? What would it look like if we designed micro-credentials for learning empowerment, civic engagement, and knowledge sharing across communities as well? So, and is that what we want to do? So here goes Jonathan for this is straight to you already. I'm trying to blitz through because I do want to save some time for discussion. So
this shouldn't. And normally, when I do presentations, I ignore anything that's on the slides anyway. So it doesn't actually matter that they're not there. But I do need this first fact, which is I'm going to talk about the pilot we ran, and we ran this from June 2024 to January 2025. Okay, we launched 5 micro-credentials in that pilot, and we had a number of plans, what we're trying to get. So broadly speaking, we were looking at, we have a mission to expand access and inclusion anyway. We know that online it helps those with financial, geographical, time constraints, etc. We know that flexibility isn't there. So what we were looking at now was more about those people who didn't want to do degree. Degree's really, really big. What's the market? What's the place? What is expectations, etc. For those mid-career professionals, wants the training, wants a certificate from a university but don't want to do degree. So that was the sort of one of the things we're looking at. We needed to explore. So a lot of this, let's say, it's pilots, a lot of exploration and trying things out. We wanted to explore how we could guarantee the quality and academic rigor in a short course, where we are taking it from an existing piece of content. Now, bizarrely, I should have probably led with that bit, but I'll talk about the process next. But this is what we're trying to get out of it. So, you know, if you're starting to decouple content from an existing module, how do you ensure those things like constructive alignment? You're moving away from cohort based to non-cohort based? What impact will that have? How do you manage that? What changes do you make to assessment? How do you bring in employability skills, maybe moving from an academic to some more non-academic kind of course? And again, how do you align with industry needs to improve employability? How do you create a sustainable model? This was a pilot, but if it was successful, we want to do more. So how do you standardize that approach? How do you template it? How do you reuse degree content effectively? What do you do about licensed content? We have an online library. These aren't University of London students. We can't use the online library. How do you get around those problems? It's all that sort of testing ground. And how do we try new things? These are non-credit bearing. It's a good opportunity to experiment. We tried a new LMS. We couldn't do that in a credit bearing one. That would be terrifying. If it's brand new, we literally only had a few months to run into this. It wasn't like a big scoping activity. It was like this prior to pilot. And of course, we try, like everybody in the world at the moment, lots of good old Gen AI to fill the gaps, etc. But again, it's non-credit bearing. It's much safer than the credit bearing space. So how do we do? What do we do? How do we go about this? So we started off with a module, 15 credit module. We worked across a number of subject areas. We had NSC project management. These are all postgraduate, by the way. NSC project management, business innovation, supply chain management, and then some content from our career service, which is something they've already sort of worked on. And we made a design decision at the beginning, which I'll talk about some of these things later on when I do a little bit, wrap it up, to get one micro-credential out of a 15 credit module. That's quite important. We made that decision earlier on, and maybe we shouldn't have done. So when we come back, we'll think about that. We did. So what we did then is, when we build our modules in the degrees, we start off with a module design plan, which is a very detailed blueprint of the course. Okay, so what we actually do with that, our first starting point is like, right, let's be clever, get these module design plans. We're going to chuck those into ChatGPT in this case, pick your software, it doesn't matter. And we're going to say, build me a micro-credential for this and ensure me all the constructive alignment, a better prompt than that, but that's what you're asking it to do. It does a very good job of turning out a micro-credential based on that, with very, very sound constructive alignment, all those good things. I'll come back to that point later on. I should rephrase that. It does a very plausible job of bringing that, so come back to that one at the end and I'll do little lessons learned. So this is what we call a provocation to academics. So we'll go to an academic then and say, we want a micro-credential. They go, this is your starting point. What do you think? So one of the things, if you've ever come to other things to talk about, it is don't like giving academics a blank piece of paper to start with. Good to give them something, provocation, starting point. We did all the usual things. We audited the course for references to week 1, week 2, which of course is going to change. Good practice, they shouldn't be there anyway, but of course they creep in this degree, we're going to do this. Well, of course, you can't use that video or that piece of content. So we did all the auditing. We built these very, very complicated spreadsheets with everything over here that's starting off with, and then over here, everything that's going to move, that's going to change, that's going to replace, etc. There's a lot. I'll come back to all these points. Wrapping up, there's a big detailed plan. We use Gen AI to generate lots of missing content, and then we use Gen AI to generate lots of industry applications in their case studies and things like that. It's very, very good at that. I'm getting some feedback already here, but it's very good at all that. And then we migrated from one VLE to another in a manual way, I have to admit. Okay, so the feedback from this. Okay, as I said, Gen AI does a lovely, plausible job of generating it. But I'll give you one example. Get the academics in early to do your syllabus creation because it does a great job, but it's completely wrong. In one case, I'll tell you exactly what it was. Is we had one course and we said generate a micro-credential for that. When we spoke to academic, put this in front of them, they said, well, that's ridiculous. This is 2 completely separate subject areas. You see, if you generated the micro-credential from the first 6 topics, it'd be perfect, and from the bottom last 4, you're not going to get one from all of it. It doesn't make sense. Get your subject matter experts in for generating the syllabus. But, you can use Gen AI to help them. If they say topics 1, 2, 8 to 9 are one coherent subject, great, you can then start applying it. But if you don't know that at the beginning, then there's no reason why you would, unless you're a subject matter expert. So I'd say that was partially successful, that particular approach. It would work if you knew what parts of that whole thing you were trying to do. I thought the constructive alignment worked. It does that very well. It's good at mapping things to other things. That's what Gen AI does. So don't be frightened to use it for that. I've got some learning designers in the room who might be looking daggers, but I think that's what my opinion was. That part worked okay. Generating AI to generate academic content and learning activities, all that is, I think, also very effective. Okay, I know that makes myself hugely unpopular by saying that. It is effective as long as you get someone to check it. If you don't get someone to check it, don't do it. If you've got someone to check it, you want to generate content with Gen AI nowadays on popular subjects. These were management, leadership, loads of content, maybe weird, smaller niche areas it might struggle. It was absolutely fine for that. Again, these are non-credit bearings. You're not going to ask it to generate 20-page reading. It worked very effectively for that. Overall, manual migration of one VLE to another was much more time consuming and complicated than we thought. Should have expected that. Microcredentials, taking small pieces of content out of one big piece to make a coherent whole over here is also much more time consuming and complicated than you might think. Certainly, maybe than not junior, of course, but some of our senior leaders might think. It is a more complicated task. There's a lot more admin and wraparound to this than perhaps realised, a lot more management of lots of small, annoying things than perhaps you think. You can't just go 1, 2, 4, boom, over there, that's it, that's the thing. It doesn't work. Particularly if you've got university registered and non-university registered students. I've probably talked enough. I don't even know what I have no idea what was on the slide. What's this one about? I've gone past it.
Yeah, there you go. Insights.
Okay, the insights. I have to look at this one because this has got facts and stuff in it. I have no idea what. Do you want to read that one? I was going through because it will be a bit of karaoke now.
Yeah, sure. So as far as the actual pilot itself, we had 133 learners enrolled. So 51 of those were UOL staff, 82 of those were alumni. It was really interesting, a 66.2% overall completion rate, which is much higher than we'd normally see from MOOCs, which is, a kind of comparable activity. The courses took longer than expected. They were designed for about 4 to 5 weeks, but took an average of 4 to 9 weeks. Learners really valued the interactive content, but requested more real-world case studies. And certainly there were questions from learners around, what employer recognition we can get from this, because I don't necessarily know, and how do these translate to the sort of wider kind of job market. I think I'm going to try and give some time for this. I'm going to blitz through these, but I think we do see kind of micro-credentials, based on the research, not emerging in isolation. So learners are seeking shorter, more flexible pathways. Governments are funding non-traditional education models. Employers are questioning whether degrees alone signal job readiness. It raises uncomfortable tensions for university. Do we integrate micro-credentials within formal degrees? I'm speaking really quickly, but I know you're all taking this on board. How do we ensure that they do not create kind of a 2-tier system? Okay, sorry, apologies for that. We'll write a blog as well. How do we ensure that they don't create a 2-tier system where full degrees retain the prestige while micro-credentials are seen as sort of a lesser option? What happens to the intellectual breadth of education when credentials are increasingly outcome-driven in a way that perhaps MOOCs weren't? With regards to global accessibility and inclusion, we do see that there is evidence that micro-credentials expand access for non-traditional learners. They provide flexible entry points for those with work or family commitments. They can support lifelong learning in an age where careers are evolving rapidly. They may also serve as a lower cost alternative to traditional degrees, which reduce financial barriers that we've spoken a bit about today. But also, again, there's concerns around digital infrastructure remaining uneven in some of the markets that we're looking at. And so learners in lower income countries might lack access to reliable internet and technology, which is, you know, what at least our pilot was built on. And you know, a really important one is that recognition is inconsistent. So micro-credential from one university may be valued, but what about one from a lesser known one when there isn't a national framework in the way that there is in other countries? So, you know, certainly some work to be done around there. So the challenge we face is not just making micro-credentials available, but also ensuring they are, you know, equitably accessible, recognised and valuable as well. Quality assurance and recognition. You know, there is some employer skepticism, but on the other hand, we have heard from employers saying that I think Julia and I went to a conference a couple of years ago where 75% of universities say they're creating job-ready graduates, and 75% of employers are saying that the graduates are not ready for the job. So there is some, you know, some perhaps opportunity there. I think you know, with regards to higher education institutions, if we can back these digital credentials, then that's you know, improving the kind of interest from employers and students alike. We need to think about what qualification and quality frameworks that we look at. There's a lot of national frameworks that they're kind of emerging now, but we don't really have kind of consistent, coherent understanding of what they are in the UK, although QAA have done some excellent work in there. And also the way they're assessed as well. You know, a lot of the feedback we got from alumni when we were talking about building these things was, I don't want to wait until an exam period. I want to be able to take assessment whenever I can. And that gives us some challenges on, you know, okay, how do we assess these in a way that is, you know, robust and meets our you know, our standards. Industry integration and employability, again, major argument about directing workforce needs, but if we are prioritizing short-term employer needs, then like, what does that mean for over a longer term learners' growth and their you know, their journey through lifelong education? If employers are dictating learning outcomes, does that risk marginalizing perspectives that don't serve corporate interests? Sorry, a bit controversial maybe, but you know, something to consider. And I think, you know, who else needs to be included when it comes to designing this? There's a lot of talk about co-development and co-design over the last you know, few hours, and I think, you know, where there is opportunity to create kind of renewable resources from people that are taking these micro-credentials and actually then contributing to, you know, the development and ongoing maintenance of these qualifications would be really exciting. And then sorry, really quickly, the implementation and sustainability. I think, you know, one of the challenges is around keeping content up to date, maintaining you know, relevance, whether that be industry relevance or otherwise. Potential solutions we talked about are embedding micro-credentials into degree pathways so they become part of a journey that students can take to getting macro qualifications. How to, you know, thinking about ways in which we can strengthen our employer partnerships while maintaining academic independence. And then I suppose more importantly, who gets to decide what, you know, counts as an education when we are having, you know, lots of different alternative approaches offered by higher education institutions, but also, you know, companies as well. So, you know, that's something that I think really need to talk about. And I will leave with something that Mary said earlier, which is, you know, don't lose sight of the student when we're producing these things. That's certainly one of our big takeaways. So sorry for that blitz through. We'll share the slides and the references, and again, I'll prompt a blog post on it as well. But we'd love to get some thoughts from you on that, and any answers to any of the questions I've asked would be really appreciated as well. Thank you very much.